everyone. We're Maren and Angela, and this is Homeschool Unrefined. We created this podcast to change the conversation about homeschool. This is a place where we encourage each other to do less, be ourselves, embrace natural learning, and keep homeschool simple, real, and fun. We live 2 miles away from each other in Minnesota, and we've been friends for over 20 years. Our kids are between the ages of 9 and 15, and we've been homeschooling a combined total of 19 years. We are an inclusive and non-sectarian podcast and community. We believe Black Lives Matter and affirm LGBTQ+ families. While this podcast is not focused on these topics, these beliefs inform our work and are woven into everything we do. We hope this is a place where we can all learn and grow together.
This is episode 145 on being a homeschool family of color with Niurka Maldonado. We are going to get to that in just a minute. First, hello, Maren.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Great. It's snowing. It's been snowing here.
It is snowing. Winter
October.
has started. Winter has begun.
I wasn't prepared for that, but here we are.
Nope, here we are. Do you have a question from our Facebook squad for today?
Yes. So our Facebook squad is a group just for our patrons, and somebody asked last week about planning. What can you just tell us about your planning routine? And I just thought that is a good thing to kind of revisit right now. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your planning routine right now?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting question because I only think about planning when I do it, which is not very often. And I know that a lot of other people do it more often, and so think about it more often. And so I don't think to talk about it besides like the fall. So I'm glad it was brought up. And so here's what I do. I plan in the fall. I think about the whole year. I don't, when I plan, the things I plan are like routines, what books we're going to buy, maybe like what classes my kids might take, like maybe a curriculum that we'll use. And I work with my kids on that. And we kind of come up with a plan. Then we start, and then just as things need tweaking throughout the year, we just change things up.
Yeah.
So I don't do like a weekly plan.
You don't do like a big scope and sequence or anything for the whole year. Like we're doing.
I don't think I've heard the word scope and sequence since I was a teacher. Thanks for bringing that up. No, I don't do that.
Angela and I were teachers at the same time, at the same school. And scope and sequence was a big deal. But
it's a big teacher term.
I think homeschooling parents sometimes do
I know.
it.
Yeah.
And it's always in the back of my head, probably just because it was such a big deal as a teacher.
Yeah. So no, I don't do that.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah. I do like, I'm always like making tweaks. So I don't want to give the impression that I don't plan, because I think I'm just always, as a tweak needs to come up, as something new needs to happen, I'm doing it like kind of in the moment.
Sure.
But I know a lot of people love to take the time to like, it's kind of like, I think, so it can be like meditative or
for sure cathartic.
Yeah. And so I understand that. It's just not me. So how about you? How do you plan?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same at the beginning of the year, where I do a lot of loose plans. I kind of set ourselves in a certain direction, set the tone a little bit, I would call it maybe, with our routines and, just kind of general. This is what we're going to work on in math. This is the direction we're going to go in math or whatever, in reading, writing, whatever. And then what I've been doing lately, and this is maybe even stepping up the game for me, honestly, because I'm not a huge planner, is I have been writing, because I have a plum planner that you suggested. I think this was an LTW of yours.
It was.
And in my plum planner, there is a priority. What I got to kind of, it's a planner that you really personalize yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I have a space for my priorities and kids' priorities. So under kids' priorities, I usually put about 3 things that I want to make sure they get to every day. And has been really kind of freeing for me because I don't have to put all the things on all the days. It's about 3 things a day, and those are the priorities. We often get to lots of things, but those are the things that like I just want done that day.
Yeah.
So I usually like on Sunday night or maybe Monday morning I'll write that out. Or I started this year by like writing 1 week out. And then every day when I wake up, I just write those things on our whiteboard. So I just want want my kids to know these are the priorities for the day. And then there's lots of other things we're going to do around that, but these are the 3 big things. And then at the end of the week, I have been kind of evaluating, like, how did that go? Do I want to do it the same next week? Do I want to tweak something? Do I need to completely delete something or add something? So I've been kind of just in my mind evaluating, kind of thinking about it maybe over the weekend or something. And then I do the same. Then I kind of just like go to the next week. On Monday morning, I'll do the same thing, but kind of maybe a little different, maybe the same. So
that's actually really surprising to me that I kind of forgot that you got a plum planner because you're just not like a paper person.
I'm not. I think, like I said, when I got it, I think it's the pandemic. I'm home and where else am I going? I can't, I think for a long time, I'm kind of an on the go person a lot. So why would I put something on a piece of paper where I'm never going to see it? But I'm home now so much that this is a good central location for me to just go check in every day. And
yeah. That's awesome. All right. If you are interested in joining our Facebook squad and our whole Patreon community for that, plus lots more episodes and content for $5 a month, you can go to patreon.com/homeschoolunrefined. And speaking of Patreon, our guest today is an OG patron, Niurka Maldonado. We're so happy she's here. She's been with us since the beginning, and we're so glad to know her. Niurka is a certified conscious parenting coach. She focuses on connection. She does individual and group parenting coaching through her business called Connected Kindred. We have followed Niurka for years. She's a great example of a homeschooler to follow. And so we are so happy to have her here today to talk about what it's like to be a homeschool family of color. If you like this conversation and want more of that, we do an extended portion for Patreon. And so if you're a patron, you will get that there too. We get a little bit more personal there. So here is our interview with Niurka.
Hello, Niurka. Thank you so much for being here today. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. Maybe we should just start out by, you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, anything that would be helpful to share with us today.
Absolutely. My name is Niurka Maldonado. I am the owner of Connected Kindred, which is my peaceful parenting coaching practice. I am a Dominican American woman with predominantly Spanish, Black, and Indigenous ancestry. And I'm also a homeschooling mom to 2 girls who are ages 4 and 7. We live in New York City with my husband, Eric, who was born in Colombia. So we are a bilingual household.
Awesome.
That's so great.
Yeah.
And I know we are going to get into your homeschool life later. First, though, Maren and I love talking about personality profiles. So we like to ask our guests, and we know you are also familiar with personality profiles. So can you tell us your Myers-Briggs, your Enneagram, your 4 tendencies, or anything else? Anything you might know.
Absolutely. You guys actually got me into this. I am on the Myers-Briggs and INFJ, and the Enneagram, I'm a 2, although I really empathize with 7 homeschoolers because I tend to need a lot of variety in my homeschooling.
Yeah.
Me too. You and I both. I'm a 7.
Absolutely. And for my 4 tendencies, I think I'm an obliger, like most people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the biggest group, isn't it? Isn't it?
The biggest group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I often, like, I'm a questioner, but I kind of sometimes wish I were an obliger because it feels like they respond to like outer
Expectations,
yeah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, but like they in order to get things done, you know, if they just like join a group or have an accountability partner or something like that motivates them to do what they want to do, and I am lacking that.
I am sort of jealous of that.
Yeah.
But I find that obligers, it's really funny. We can talk ourselves out of accountability really easy if it doesn't feel authentic, and that's always been my struggle. It has to be like truly to help and elevate others. Otherwise, I'm like, they don't really care.
Yeah.
And I can see that as an INFJ for sure, because all these parts of your personality kind of work together. So as an INFJ obliger, that's like different than, a different Myers-Briggs obliger, So all those factors.
Very interesting. We could do a whole episode just on this, but we probably should move on.
All right. So Niurka, could you tell us a little bit about how you decided to homeschool?
Yeah, it sort of happened for me by accident. I happened to pick up a book that caught my eye, John Holt's Why Children Fail, which led me to go back and read some of his other works like How Children Learn. And then what really sealed the deal for me was actually a much lesser known book that was recommended to me through Amazon because I was reading so much John Holt book. And this book was called And the Skylark Sings With Me, and that was written by David H. Albert. And that book was the one that really truly changed the trajectory of our lives.
Oh, wow. Can you tell me a little bit about that book?
I don't know that book.
It's incredible. He was, I guess you could call him an unschooling dad, but I don't think he ever uses that term. I don't think it was popular when he was raising his kids. And he had 2 daughters that he basically unschooled, him and his wife. And he talked about kind of the way that they're not just the girls, but their entire lives evolved as a family and what learning looked like and more the rhythm of the family and the really important values that kind of just organically sprung up over time. And it was such a beautiful, really a manifesto. And I became incredibly inspired by it.
Wow.
That sounds amazing.
So do you feel like homeschooling do you feel like it's a whole family affair for you?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really shaped things for me in terms of even just my own personal development and overcoming just my own fears over it. And because with homeschooling, you kind of go back and forth between this is great, I'm enjoying all this freedom. And then there's like these moments of panic of, is this really okay? Am I really allowed to do this? And the push and pull of that has really affected my own kind of personality and the way that I kind of nurture myself and soothe myself. And it just extends to everything in terms of where we travel and why we travel to certain places, and always being careful to nurture my own hobbies and making sure that my husband attends to his. It's all part of it.
Yes.
So awesome.
It is. Okay. It is. So we are here to specifically talk to you about being a homeschool family of color, and your experiences and insight with that. We do not take lightly that you are here to educate us. Marn and I are both white, and, we want to just be upfront that we appreciate you coming here to talk to us. We don't just have white listeners, though. We have listeners of color, too. And so we appreciate that you're here to talk to all of us. So we'd love to hear more about that experience. To start, do you homeschool alongside other families of color, or do you feel like, or are you mostly with other white families?
No, absolutely. I do homeschool in a very I live in Queens, New York, which is the most ethnically diverse urban area in the world. It's one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. And so I homeschool alongside all different sorts of people with different religious backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, race, you name it. And there is a special kinship in my experience between homeschoolers that have something in common that's just like fundamental to who they are. So when I come across a homeschooling family of color, there tends to be just this instant kind of understanding for certain common struggles, as I imagine happens when Jewish families that happen to homeschool come together, or Christian families, or even families that are like all girls or all boys.
Right.
Common kind of understanding there.
Yes, for sure. And I know, though, you have talked in the past about how you have been in activities where sometimes you are the only family of color. Can you speak to that just a little bit? What is that like for you? And maybe just compare that to when you are with people of color. How is it different for you, and how does it feel?
The best way that I can describe that experience is to describe an experience that every homeschooling mother has gone through. And it's when you walk into a party, or you're attending a dinner, or you walk into a room and with other fellow parents, and yet you are the only homeschooler. And the moment that the crowd kind of learns that, there are times where the attention is going to be directed to you. Curiosity and bewilderment, or a genuine interest in getting to know you. And what happens in that moment is that you get on the receiving end of everyone's questions, and the whys, the how-tos, and all the while you're noticing people's facial expressions, the surprise, the disapproval, perhaps the moments when you pleasantly surprise them or you dazzle them, and someone might even start to share the horror story. Have you read Educated by Tara Westover? Have you heard this latest terrible tragedy that happened in the news? And everyone knows a friend of a friend who knows a family that was abusive to their child. And you smile politely, and you try not to come across as too defensive, and you're recalibrating the whole time to ensure that you are representing the best of homeschoolers, that your kids don't come across too strange, or that you don't come across as too reactive in the negative sense to traditional schools. You want everyone around you to be comfortable. This is what it's like to be a person of color. And it's magnified when you're a person of color and you're homeschooling, and you walk in the room and you notice, I'm the only one, at least for me. And that may not be the experience shared by all, but I become really kind of sensitive to making sure that I represent Latinos the best that I can, and that I don't come across as too sensitive over, suggested activities or books. And frankly, it can be very exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I imagine it takes a lot of energy to make other people comfortable with who you are. And so we'd love to know more about that, and how that feels for you. So what kind of pressure does that put on you?
You were both kind enough to send me a few questions ahead of time so that I could reflect on it. And this was a particularly tough one for me to come up with an answer with. And I realize it's because as a person of color, I have lived with this pressure my entire life. And so to try to describe the pressure is almost impossible for me. It would be like trying to describe what energy feels like for you. And it's a tricky one. I do know that when I find myself in groups with truly understanding, caring, loving folks that get some of the struggle to some extent, and it's not exclusively people of color. There's definitely a lot of white families that have done the anti-racism work to make this possible, where I feel genuinely understood. There is a lightness there that I am not afforded in my everyday life, and it's a lovely, lovely, relaxed, light feeling.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like these questions are really, I mean, these are really big questions. Like you said, it's hard to even kind of wrap your, words around these feelings. So I thank you for describing that. Is there ever a time when you kind of have wished, or when it might be important for a white homeschool parent to like kind of speak up about something that is like racist? There's maybe a comment or a book or something that's happening that is not right. You don't feel like you can say it. How important is that for a white person to speak up at that moment?
It is invaluable to the energy reserves of the people of color in the room to have other people around who get it and who are confident enough in their voice to speak out. Because as a person of color, you are constantly recalibrating and you're constantly kind of tallying up how many times you can speak up. And it's in order to make other people comfortable, you don't want to be the person who's constantly the only one in the room that is calling out certain books or certain and if you wanted to do biographies on certain so-called American heroes, and you don't always want to be the one raising your hand with the objection. It's not comfortable, and it's not it is not a good source of our energy. And it can be so helpful when we can rest and watch someone else raise an objection for the betterment, not just of the children of color in the group, but for all of the children in the group, because we're not just looking out for our own kids and preserving their self-esteem and the way that they look at themselves when they see themselves in the mirror. We also want, when we enter groups and spaces, my experience has been that we want what's best for all of the kids.
Right.
And it is in the best interest of everyone in that room to question certain books, certain narratives, certain stories that we have been fed, so that we don't pass them on to our kids.
Yes. And I would just like to ask, or maybe add a little bit more of that question to that question. Like, if I'm thinking of co-ops where it's not, I mean, there's nothing like maybe overtly racist or anything like that going on, but it might be very white focused, or, like maybe all the books are about white people. They're not, like overtly racist, but they're just, it's just an all white curriculum or something. That's where I think it can get probably kind of dangerous for, because white people often, we don't speak up about that because it doesn't seem like it's, that bad. But that's where I also think that's a place where we as white people can also speak out. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Very oftentimes the harm that's being done is not necessarily something that's overtly offensive or racist or old-fashioned. It's just the absence of the other.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and to elevate those voices so that we all get the benefit of that truly rich education.
Yeah,
Right.
so true. So true. It is rich. It's much more rich. Yeah, for sure. So why do you think it's important for families of color to consider homeschooling if they're able to?
Of course it is, every parent in their heart of heart knows what is best for their child, and no one would say that homeschooling is best for every child. However, there are some unique benefits to homeschooling that are particular to children of color. And it is that you get to immerse your child in his own unique or her own unique ancestry or cultural background and history. And the child can truly be immersed in that on a level that is just not possible in institutionalized settings. And that in and of itself is such a wonderful, enriching, and just confident making factor for homeschooling. And it's something that I really, really enjoy with my kids. I love history. I love studying people and the heroes. And whenever I can come across or convey to them something that relates to like a country that, their grandparents are born in or their ancestors came from, it is so exciting for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so that sounds like finding joy in homeschool, which I was going to ask about next. In addition to that, what other ways are you finding joy in your homeschool and for yourself?
It took me, I think the first year or two in homeschooling, it's such a learning curve because no matter how much you embrace the alternative, what you do is school at home because that's what you know.
Yeah.
So it took time, but I think I have finally fully embraced the advantage of the flexible schedule that comes with homeschooling. Like I really was trying to do 5 days a week,
Yeah.
of 8 to 3 for a minute, and it was the worst idea ever. And now my joy comes from like I don't do Wednesdays for whatever reason. I learned early Wednesdays work first for us. Anytime we ever tried to do any kind of academic work, there would be tantrums. And so Wednesdays are permanently like non-school days for us. And that is just those small things bring me so much joy. Being able to give myself permission to do it as it fits our personalities and where we're at. I love it.
That is so great. I can see that. I could see Wednesdays needing a break. 2 days of school, break. Yep. 2 more days of school, weekend.
Okay. I think that might be mind blowing to some of our listeners because I've never thought of that either. I've heard of people taking Fridays off or Mondays, but I've never heard of Wednesdays. And that kind of sounds amazing.
It's pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because by Wednesday you're living for the weekend sometimes, it's time, but I love that. So what resources and spaces have you found that are most helpful to you in addressing your needs as a homeschooling parent of color?
So I have some great ones. First and foremost, I do want to say that you guys have cultivated such a welcoming and loving and nurturing atmosphere on Patreon, that that would absolutely be on my list. For those of you listening that have not joined yet, now Maren and Angela did not, encourage me to say this.
No.
I was going to say this, but the Patreon community is so wonderful and loving, and I can't say enough about it. So if you're on the about it, definitely go there. If you're a homeschooling mother or father,
thank you.
Support.
Thank you. And Niurka, you've been with us since the beginning, since we started Patreon. So we appreciate your support. Thank you.
Supported us from the beginning. So yes,
it takes a certain amount of savviness to be able to like cultivate like a warm feeling with anything online, and you guys have nailed it. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Some of my other favorites are, if you're on Instagram, you can easily find this. It's called the Aluna method, and it was created by a woman named Juliana Luna. And basically her method involves an African-centered framework for self-awareness. And a lot of her principles are based on the Brazilian Yoruba perspective. So it's incredibly healing, incredibly powerful healing modalities that resonate deeply with me. On Facebook, I really love, I haven't joined too many Facebook groups, but one that I love is called the Sankofa Club, the Raising Proud Black Children, which is run by the Sankofa Club. And it's such a positive, loving group. People are constantly posting adorable pictures of their kids and what they're doing, either in homeschool setting or just projects on their own. And it's really touching and inspiring.
That's awesome.
Then it's a fantastic, I'm really into, especially because of COVID, these kind of positive pockets on, they've become very important. The other one I love is Latinx parenting. In the Latino community, we have a history of sometimes really severe corporal punishments. If we weren't hit, sometimes, you can just talk to your parents and they were hit, sometimes beaten. And this group is just dedicated to undoing all of that trauma. And I really love them.
That's amazing.
My last favorite spot, which I think I've heard you guys talk about, Rachel Cargill.
Yeah.
Instagram. I just find her to be such a wealth of information in terms of American history, and I use her a lot for my history studies.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's so great. Have you found, we haven't talked about this question, but have you found a growing number of resources, or do you feel like, there's more up and coming? Is this a thing that's gonna maybe even encourage parents of color to homeschool more?
I think so. I'm not an academic. It's not something that I've studied, but I'd be willing to bet money that the trend towards homeschooling, probably across all groups, is going, given everything that's happened. But even before COVID, I'm sure there's a lot more homeschooling families of color who are choosing to homeschool. And certainly I've noticed the trend in New York City.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
And you mentioned all these spaces, and I want people to know we will put these in the show notes so you don't have to scramble to write all those down. Okay, so at the beginning, you mentioned that you have a coaching business, and we would love to hear more. We'd love our audience to hear more about that. Marn and I know a little bit about it. We got some coaching sessions with you, Niurka, and we loved them. I'll just speak to my experience.
Yes.
You have a calming presence and voice that just, when I talk to you, brings my blood pressure down
Yes.
many degrees or whatever blood pressure is measured by. And I really appreciated that. I really appreciate your meditations that you recommend. And you also you were giving
Coached
meditations
through,
to me,
yeah.
coached through meditations. Yes. And so I appreciated that about your coaching. But I probably should have let you, I know Myron wants to talk about your coaching too,
Yeah.
but I probably should have let you explain your coaching a bit first.
Yeah, why don't you do that? That would
Why
be
don't you do that? That'd be great.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. That means the world to me. I absolutely love what I do, and I love working with mothers in particular, and homeschooling mothers especially. Basically, there are literally tens of thousands of parenting books available to us today, and even more articles and tons of groups and conversation around this idea of how to be a quote unquote better parent. And a lot of the times we read about these practices and we're fully on board and we believe in these philosophies. And then in the heat of the moment, it is hard to turn that into action. Specifically, I mean peaceful ways of communicating with our children. And so what I do as a coach is I work with primarily moms and dads, but also just caregivers in general to children and teachers who want to have a deep connection with a child or with children in their lives that is respectful and kind and doesn't rely on spanking, screaming, punishments, even bribing, none of that. It's basically all that stuff that we would never dare use on our bosses or on our spouse or on our friends, to nurture that bond and still ensure that our child is getting the guidance that he or she needs and is respecting the boundaries of other people and of the household. And it's kind of a tricky thing to accomplish, but it's absolutely doable. And one of the first things I do is I dig deep with my clients to find out how they were parented. And I search for any limiting beliefs that they have that they'd like to shift so that their actions are aligned with the principles that they believe in their heart are best for their kids.
Yes. So good. I experienced all of that. That's exactly what you did when we had these coaching calls together. I felt like you found the exact thing that I needed to hear by asking the right questions. You found the thing inside of me that I needed to think about, and it changed. I mean, it really changed everything. And it's funny because, we have a homeschool podcast and we talk about parenting a lot, and we are kind of coaching other parents too, so that, like you said, theoretically, I know this stuff. I do. I know it. I tell other parents to do this stuff. And yet I needed to hear it specifically about my own life, my own about my own experiences as a child, my own, my own personal children, and what they need is different from, a general conversation about parenting. And so it was, it just, it really did change probably the trajectory of this year, especially for one of my kids, and probably our relationship probably forever, you know what I mean? So, and I'm sure I'm going to need to hear those things again from you for sure. Or, but it was just so helpful. I mean, it really was priceless. So
wonderful. So glad.
Yeah. So where can we find you? Where can we find information about your coaching?
So I am at www.connectedkindred.com, and my Instagram page where I post a lot of my videos and things is Connected Kindred, and I'm on Facebook at Connected Kin. And I would love to extend a discount to the Homeschool Unrefined family. If you live to this and you would like to receive coaching either in a group setting or private, you just use the code Homeschool Unrefined when we speak on the phone, and I will automatically apply a $200 discount to my private coaching session and $100 off of a group session.
Wow. That's generous. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Niurka, for being with us. We are actually going to continue this conversation and get a bit more personal in Patreon. And so if you're a Patreon supporter, you can hear more from Niurka there. But for this regular episode, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you, and we loved introducing you to our audience.
Oh, thank you, guys.
All right. Before we get to our LTWs, I wanted to mention Niurka is giving our patrons a free meditation gift. So if you are a patron, check either in Patreon or your podcast app where you get all of our other things from Homeschool Unrefined, and it's going to be there. So thank you, Niurka, so much for that. All right. LTWs.
Yeah.
Angela, what are you loving this week?
Okay, I am loving a podcast. It is called Heavyweight. This may be, I know I say this kind of about a lot of different categories. I say this might be my favorite podcast ever.
Wow.
If not, it's definitely in the top 3.
I have to say, I think that's strong language for you because you are a podcast person.
Yeah.
So,
but this is so good.
Is good.
This is when it comes into my app, I am right there, ready for it. I'm gonna listen right away.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm talking about it is their new season is out. They have been off for months, and they're in my favorites. So when something new comes out, I see it, and I was joyful when I saw it. So Heavyweight is a Gimlet podcast. Gimlet does a great job with podcasts. They do Reply All, which I know a lot of you also like. But this is hosted by Jonathan Goldstein, who is I would say, master storyteller.
Yes.
And what this is each episode is separate, and it follows a person and something from their past that's unanswered, or a mystery, or something they need closure on, something they want more answers from.
Right.
And so like you're kind of on the edge of your seat in each episode, like wondering, like, is this gonna get resolved? Like, are they gonna like talk to this person, figure out what happened, like get answers to this question or whatever? And they're very usually very, like, they're not trivial things. They're usually like kind of a deep personal, like about a relationship or something
that has never let go. It's just one of those memories sometimes that you're like, I've never resolved this in my head, and I need it resolved. So so each episode is numbered. They have some other episodes in their feed that are like, updates on things, or they did some quarantine things. But if you look for the numbered episodes, those are the main ones. The one that just came out is good. I think it's episode 30. But each episode going back like a couple years is really, really good. If you want a good one to start with, I would start with episode 16. It's called Rob. So Rob, is an adult and remembers breaking his arm as a child, but no one in his family, his immediate family, like his siblings and his parents, remember that. They think he's like kind of gone crazy, and like they think he dreamt it. And he's like, no, I broke my arm, And so they're trying to get to the bottom of, did he really break his arm? Which is so funny, because how do you forget?
How does anybody forget that,
How can there be conflicting stories about this,
I know. So they're like talking to people. They're trying to get hospital records. They're like looking for old photos. So it's just like, it's just like compelling. I don't know. That's just one example, but all of them are great, and I would highly recommend them.
Great.
Yeah.
All right.
Myron, what are you loving this week?
I'm also loving a few podcasts. I have a tie this week. So I can't pick between
tie.
these two podcasts because they're both so good for very different reasons. The first one is Poetry Unbound, and it is a very short, like 15-minute episode, and it is highlights one poem. And this man, an Irishman, he has a great accent, an Irish accent, and it's just so, and he also has like this very soothing music behind it, and it's just almost like a meditation, this poem. So he reads the poem, and then he talks about the poem for about probably 10 minutes, just the context of the poem, the history, the maybe about the author, about the context around this poem, what certain lines mean. And it is just, it's just so wonderful because how often do we sit and like read poetry? It's just
No.
it's especially, new modern poetry that there's just, it sometimes can feel very overwhelming to even go and find these poems. And then how do you know if it's like good quality or, am I going to be able to understand it? So this podcast just gives you a really good one. And the story is just so rich, and I don't know, I just feel like I get so much good insight. And then after he explains it, he rereads it. So you're almost listening to it with new ears. Like, so much more about this poem, and it just feels almost like a different poem the second time he reads it.
Yeah.
And it means so much, and your emotions are tied to it, and it just, it's just so good.
That sounds amazing.
Mm-hmm. And it's only 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes read poetry and don't know what it means. So this sounds perfect for me.
Yeah. And I was thinking my 13-year-old would probably love this as part of her homeschool work, because it's a poetry study. It's literature. I mean, there's so many things going on there. So many good things. And so I'm loving that one, and I don't miss an episode now, and I've gone back through the catalog too.
Okay, great.
And then my other new favorite, well, I shouldn't say new favorite, but I've rekindled my love for this one. It's called Throughline, and it is an NPR podcast, and it basically takes a story from history and retells it. And it's often stories that we don't know about, or we might know the main thing that happened in history, but we don't know the context around what really happened. And often they share stories about people who we didn't hear about. We've never heard about, the full story about what happened, because sometimes just certain voices were being shared in history. And so this is kind of like the well-rounded version of the story, the real thing that happens sometimes. And it always, this is like the whole point of their podcast, is that it is relevant to something that's happening today in America, or in the world. So it is, it's, we're all going to relate to it, because it's meaningful right now to us. And it's eye-opening.
Right.
And the storytelling is really, really, really good. So.
And do you have an episode that you would recommend somebody start with?
Yes. So the last few that I've listened to have been so good. One of them is called The United States versus Billie Holiday. And, Billie Holiday was this jazz singer, and she was really kind of targeted to be an example of cracking down on drugs. And basically, like, it tells the life story of Billie Holiday, and just kind of the demise of her life because of how, the police kind of targeted her. And so that was really, it was kind of disheartening, but also eye-opening, like I said. And then their new series is called, I want to say, I'm gonna look, make sure I get it right. I think it's called Misrepresentative Democracy. And the first episode in this series is about the Electoral College, and just the history of how it even started in the first place, why it started and how it started, and why it's been so hard to kind of change the way it works right now. So
Wow. I am definitely adding those to my queue right now, even though my queue is overflowing.
I know you have a big queue right now.
But I'm going to add these because I'm really interested in all that you talked about. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fun to just, not fun, but like it's good for my brain to listen to things that I don't always think about all day long. So
for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I'm loving it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. If you want to find us on social media, we're on Facebook and Instagram at Homeschool Unrefined. We have our website, homeschoolunrefined.com, where you can find links to everything that we talked about. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening.
Homeschool Unrefined is created and produced by Maren Gorse and Angela Sizer. Amanda Ginn is our content and marketing strategist.
This podcast is listener supported. We have been and are happy to be personally investing in this business we believe in. But we also know we deserve to have a business that invests in itself. When we reach 200 patrons, we'll have enough to cover our costs and the many projects we are dreaming of. Join our growing community at patreon.com/homeschoolunrefined.
Additionally, we are donating 10% of all Patreon income and product sales to The Conscious Kid, a Black and Brown-led organization that has been instrumental in our own evolution and in leading the way in both ideological and tangible change with their work in parenting and education through a critical race lens.
No matter how you homeschool, you are exactly who your kids need. You're doing great.